how did lobster go from prison food to gourmet delight? In the world of fine dining today, few foods evoke the same sense of luxury as lobster. It is a symbol of indulgence, a delicacy gracing the tables of the wealthy, served in upscale restaurants with buttered elegance. But this wasn't always the case. In fact, for much of history, lobster was seen as anything but luxurious. It was a food so abundant and undesirable that it was reserved for the poor, the desperate, and even prisoners. This is the story of how lobster, once considered the food of the lowliest in society, transformed into the epitome of culinary refinement. Our story begins on the rocky coastlines of colonial America in the 17th century. Long before it was boiled, buttered, and revered, the lobster was a creature of embarrassment and shame for many of the coastal settlers. Piles of lobster washed up on New England's shores in vast quantities. At low tide, the sheer number of these spiny crustaceans littered the beaches so thickly that early settlers described the shores as heaped with lobsters. To them, this abundance was not a gift, but an annoyance. Unlike today's farm-to-table approach that celebrates local, sustainable food sources, early settlers viewed lobster as a nuisance, a grotesque sea insect. Its spiny exterior and large claws gave it an unappealing, almost monstrous appearance. Moreover, lobster was so plentiful that it became synonymous with poverty. It was a food you ate when there was nothing else, a last resort for those who couldn't afford to eat anything more desirable. Native American tribes, who were the first to harvest lobsters for sustenance, used them not only as food but also as fertilizer for crops. For them, lobster was a practical resource, not a delicacy to be savored. As the colonies expanded and the lobster continued to dominate the shorelines, it became a staple for the lowest classes. In many coastal towns, indentured servants, laborers, and the poor were fed lobster so frequently that they rebelled against it. In Massachusetts, there are reports of servants insisting on contracts that limited their lobster consumption to no more than 3 times a week, a measure to avoid the stigma and monotony of eating it daily. Lobster was the very definition of undesirable food, and its overabundance made it cheap and plentiful. But perhaps the most notorious chapter in the history of lobster's humble beginnings comes from the American penal system. In the 18th and early 19th centuries, prisoners in the northeastern colonies were regularly served lobster, which was viewed as a form of punishment. Some prisons fed lobster to inmates because it was so cheap and plentiful. In fact, prisoners complained about the monotonous and degrading diet, and in some instances, protests ensued. Lobster was food for the disenfranchised, and it was served with the same disregard given to those society had cast aside. For decades, lobster was synonymous with desperation and deprivation. Its association with the poor was so ingrained that few could have predicted the remarkable transformation that lay ahead. But like many stories in culinary history, the tale of lobster's rise is one of reinvention and changing perceptions. In the mid-19th century, things began to shift, thanks to a combination of technology, changing tastes, and the rise of tourism in New England. One of the key factors in lobster's transformation was the advent of the railroad. Before refrigeration and efficient transportation systems, fresh lobster was difficult to ship and was mostly consumed locally. However, with the expansion of the railways, lobster could be transported inland to places where people were less familiar with the creature's former reputation as a food for the poor. In cities like New York and Chicago, lobster began to appear on the menus of fancy restaurants, where it was marketed as an exotic, coastal delicacy. The lack of awareness about lobster's lowly status in New England worked in its favor, and it soon became a sought-after dish for the urban elite. As lobster gained popularity in upscale restaurants, the price began to rise, and the public's perception of the food started to shift. No longer a symbol of poverty, lobster was now seen as an indulgent treat for special occasions. Its rarity in inland areas added to its allure, as did the skill and precision required to cook and prepare it. What was once an abundant, overlooked resource was now being rebranded as a luxury item, a food that required refinement and expertise. Another turning point in lobster's history was the rise of tourism in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. As wealthy vacationers flocked to New England's coastal resorts, they sought out authentic local experiences. Lobster, once scorned by locals, was now embraced as a regional specialty, served fresh from the ocean and enjoyed by tourists eager to sample the quaint flavors of the coast. Lobster bakes, where whole lobsters were boiled and served with corn and potatoes, became a quintessential New England experience, further cementing lobster's status as a special occasion food. By the mid-20th century, lobster had completed its transformation from prison food to luxury cuisine. The introduction of new cooking techniques, like boiling and broiling, helped elevate the lobster's flavor, while the advent of freezing technology allowed it to be shipped worldwide. No longer confined to coastal towns, lobster became a global delicacy, its high price and intricate preparation making it a symbol of wealth and refinement. Today, lobster is enjoyed in myriad forms, from lobster rolls served at seaside shacks to lobster thermidor gracing the menus of fine dining establishments. Its flavor is prized for its sweet, delicate richness, and its journey from despised sea creature to culinary icon is a testament to the power of changing perceptions. What was once so common that it lined the streets and fed prisoners is now the pinnacle of indulgence. Yet, even as we savor a succulent lobster tail or crack open a claw dipped in butter, the history of this creature reminds us of how taste, value, and food traditions evolve over time. What was once seen as a food fit only for the poor and disenfranchised is now cherished by foodies and gourmands the world over. Lobster's story is one of reinvention, a reminder that even the most humble of ingredients can, with time, become a symbol of status, taste, and culture. In the end, the tale of lobster is not just about food. It's about the human tendency to reframe and revalue what we eat based on shifting social, economic, and cultural contexts. From the shores of colonial New England to the white tablecloth restaurants of modern cities, lobster has journeyed through history as a reflection of the changing tides of fortune, taste, and desire.